Okay, so Tatty12321, exciting username there, asks about becoming an instructor, becoming a HEMA instructor. And this is not a I don't think, particularly interesting question, but it has been asked a number of times. So very briefly, I'll just say there's no rules for becoming a HEMA instructor. But generally speaking, you have to get a fair amount of knowledge and capability before you're able really to teach people. And if you try and teach people before you've got that knowledge or before you've got that ability, usually people can see through that. So whilst a complete charlatan could set themselves up as a HEMA teacher at the moment, and I'm sure it has happened, generally speaking they won't have much success out of it, because you've got to realise that most people, even in the world today, are able to go on YouTube and see what HEMA fencing looks like. They're able to see instructional videos and buy DVDs and books from reputable HEMA instructors. And equally, many people these days who go to a HEMA class might be, and I have this myself, might be very experienced sport fencers or martial artists from other traditions, Japanese or Chinese or Filipino or whatever. So it happens fairly regularly that I get people come to my class who've got quite a bit of experience in Filipino martial arts, or have competed to a high level in sport fencing or whatever, or kendo. So to be honest, if you're not kind of able to walk the walk and talk the talk, you're probably not going to get a successful club going. So in terms of building up that knowledge and experience, the best way always, and I always say this, is to join a club, join an existing club, and you know, do the legwork, learn the system, even if it's a system you don't initially want, that you're not particularly interested in. I mean, this is, you know, the first system I studied, I wasn't particularly interested in that period or even in that weapon. But it was incredibly valuable for me to train under a skilled instructor with a lot of experience and learn how, you know, learn about a European martial arts system and learn how to teach and learn how to do it, of course. That's the most important thing. So first step, if you can, should always be to get to a good HEMA club, or any HEMA club frankly. Failing that, try and attend another club that has relevant sort of skills that you can bring over to HEMA, be it fencing or kendo or Filipino martial arts or whatever, and just work on building up your knowledge and abilities. And you know, once you're at a level where you've got enough knowledge and enough abilities that you can benefit other people, then you're ready to be a teacher. A teacher is just someone who teaches someone else to do something or to be better at something. A mentor, and you know, if you're not comfortable calling yourself an instructor or a teacher, then open up maybe a study group or a, you know, a round table club where there's no hierarchy, where you say, okay, I might have the most knowledge, I might have the most experience, so I'm going to share that with the rest of you for now, and you know, we'll see how we are in 6 months' time or in a year's time, and maybe use DVDs and books from experienced instructors to all together to study. And so there's many ways you can build up a club without necessarily thinking, how do I set myself up as an instructor? And in fact, I think that's probably the wrong thing to do. If you're not already experienced in HEMA, then thinking about being an instructor from the get-go is probably not a good idea. You should think first and foremost about getting experience in the martial art of your choice, and only much further down the line should you think about sharing that. So you know, when I set up Schola Gladiatoria initially, although it was obvious I was going to be the person running things because I was the one with far more experience than my friends, it was more of a kind of workshop, kind of round table, kind of study group type arrangement. And it was only with time, after years of teaching, that I kind of started to think, okay, I am an instructor now, and resign myself to that fact. And in actual fact, I never set out to be an instructor. If I had been able to just improve my skills under one really awesome instructor, then I would have done that. But I had certain weapons I wanted to study, certain systems I wanted to study, and there was no instructor to be able to take me under their wing and teach me. But actually my priority was always to try and get good. I was far more interested in being good as a martial artist and being able to compete than I was at teaching. And you know, maybe that's been to the detriment of my teaching in some regards, but my focus has always been on the martial art more than being a teacher. Which is kind of ironic considering that I now run a YouTube channel where I just sit here talking at a camera for hours and loads. So, Ben Kirby says, do any of the various martial arts treatises, I presume you mean European martial arts treatises, because I don't know much about non-European ones, do any of them talk about general exercises a student could do to maintain fighting fitness? Well, let's think about this. I think exercises in a modern sense, I'm not sure that they do, no. I think that the exercises that are described in the treatises are actually the practicing of what's described in the treatises. So, you know, when I used to do Kung Fu, my Kung Fu teacher had, he had a shout one day at some people who he'd seen in the gym doing weights and saying, you know, that time could be spent practicing your Kung Fu, and if you're doing weights to get better at Kung Fu, then you should just be doing more Kung Fu, because the Kung Fu will make you stronger and in the correct way for what you need for your Kung Fu. And that kind of stuck in my head because I'd never really thought about things like that before. And that's also stuck in my head in relation to HEMA as well, where a lot of people make a big thing out of weight training to make themselves better at HEMA. Now, I wouldn't say that cardio and weight training are bad things to do at all. They are good things to do. However, you could argue that rather than running round and round in a circle for 2 hours, if you did an assault, as it's called, or a flourish, a set of movements from one of the Bolognese treatises, or from any treatise that's got them, if you did that for 2 hours, you'd probably be doing just as much cardio, and it would be exercising exactly what you need to benefit your HEMA training. So, you know, equally, if there's nothing wrong with push-ups and sit-ups, but you can probably exercise the same muscles using Indian clubs or indeed swords to do sword-related exercises. But what I will say is I am no expert on fitness and health at all, and I'm not going to pretend to be. So do what you think's best. But what I will say is there is a lot of exercise contained within the treatises, even if you don't have a HEMA club and you don't have any desire or interest in actual sword fighting at all. If you get yourself a big two-handed sword like a montante, or even just a large stick of the same size and with a fair amount of weight to it, and go through the montante exercises, the greatsword exercises contained in one of the two-handed sword sources, if you go through those movements a lot, you will get really strong and really fit. So I would say that generally speaking, exercise in historical periods was mostly doing whatever you want to be good at a lot. So if you want to be good at rowing, you row a lot. If you want to be good at swinging a sword around, you swing a sword around a lot. If you want to be good at jousting in armour on a horse, you ride a horse a lot wearing your armour. And there are references to, and we come back to Marshal Boucicaut again, there are references to Marshal Boucicaut vaulting over a horse, I believe it's a wooden horse actually, a practice horse, but horse vaulting in armour, and climbing up a ladder on the rungs on the underneath in armour, and doing all of these sort of things. And it's there's also exercise mentioned in Pietro Monte's treatise, which was I say published, it was printed I think in 1509, but it was probably written in about the 1480s. So it was published after Pietro Monte was dead, and Pietro Monte was a bit similar to Marshal Boucicaut. He was a legendary knight, but nearly 100 years later. And he does talk about jogging, or running at least, and how to breathe. I think he talks about swimming as well. So there we go. I think I think by and large the treatises don't talk really much, with the exception of Pietro Monte, don't really talk much about exercise in the modern sense. But what they do talk about is, of course, a physical activity, fencing, and including solo forms, solo exercises that you can do as physical strength building and cardio building exercises. So there we go, I hope that's answered that question.